Okay, so now we've moved into the control room. Some of the things that have had to happen to move the shot are the amps have been turned up. We've obviously Danny with his guitar is in here. We've got we're going to start with this plasma pedal as our distortion, and we've got a track in the Pro Tools session opened and set up. The 4 microphones are going into the console, and we're going to blend them to one track. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to establish some levels in here and adjust the plasma pedal. Hopefully it's the right distortion pedal for us. It's a kind of a new thing that we really like. And we will audition a few different guitars once we kind of get our gain and amp blend set up and do a little bit of EQ. So Danny, if you would play a little bit. And I'll just show you what the sound is with the amps turned up before we put the plasma pedal in here. And I'll be adjusting the gain on the microphones into the computer. So if you would, sir. I'm going to go through each of the microphones one by one and tell you which one we're hearing, and then just so you can hear them without the distortion pedal on there. Obviously, that's not distorted enough of a sound for what we're going for. We're going to replace the main intro and chorus heavy guitars in the song. So first microphone I'm going to show you is the 57. That's on the projector amp with the 212 cabinet, and then I'll show you the 414 that's on that amp, and then the third microphone will be the 57 that is on the Ampeg Jet. So if Danny, would you play again? So they all have a different sound on their own. Some seem to be more usable than others. Now I'm going to turn the plasma pedal on, and I'll go through them the same order one more time. Cool. So the 57 that's on the projector amp sounds a little bit, just in isolation, sounds like it's a little bit the brightest, most transient, brightest sound. The 414 has a very nice overall sound that's on the projector amp, and then the 57 that's on the Ampeg sounds kind of the darkest, but it kind of has a nice. It doesn't have a lot of top or bottom, but it has sort of a nice warm mid-range that seems kind of cool. So now I'm going to experiment with a blend of the mics and get kind of something that feels pretty good on its own. Make sure my record level, my level to the Pro Tools is looking good. And maybe do a little bit of individual EQ on them, and then I'll just sort of talk to you about where I've arrived with that balance and EQs and stuff. Play. So what I've discovered is that by listening in here, it's hard to tell out in the room, but I've discovered that the Ampeg Jet, its polarity. Maybe it's on the amp, or maybe it's the record path somewhere. For it to sound correct, I'm having to flip the polarity here on the desk. So I know how that sounds in here. I'm going to go out to the amps real quick, and on the JD7, I have the ability to flip the signal going to that amp. We keep a couple pairs of gun muffs around for loud recording when somebody's got to go out into the room and move a drum mic or something like this. playing guitar. I mean, Danny's gonna be pretty good and not play while I go out there. I'm still gonna put him on just in case he you know, musicians, they're sort of in the mode of playing, and sometimes they forget that someone's out there, and they just kind of start playing. So Gun Muffs will be right back. Okay, so I'm back, and you know, the reason that the amps are really loud out there is because we're recording rock music, and the only way to get amps to be to have that full tone and get that distortion saturated sound is you have to turn them up pretty loud. There are devices that can help you. Obviously, like there's Power Soaks, or like Universal Audio makes the aux box, where you can have the speaker volume much lower but still be driving the amp. We're not using a setup like that. We've just kind of got the amps turned up a little bit more of a traditional way. You can totally there's ways to have a low volume. If you're recording with Amp Sims Direct, then the amp doesn't have to be any louder than you're listening to everything else in the mix. But you know, in rock music, drums get played hard and amps get turned up, and so that's what we're doing. We touched on like record level with the acoustic. It's going to be a similar thing with the electric. We'll kind of come back to it and talk about it. I just want to be clear that just because the amps are loud doesn't mean I want to make a loud recording. That's two different things. The amps are loud to get the tone out of them and get the distortion out of them, but that doesn't necessarily dictate that I want to record it really loud. Sort of a similar rule will apply that where I balance the volume, it will dictate some of how loud I want to record it. You know, guitars, I'm going to kind of want to be in the -9, -6 range. Anywhere from -3 to -12 is okay on electric guitars, depending on how much low frequency they have and how much dynamics you're leaving in. This is going to be a very distorted part. I don't need to use any compression in here on it. Distortion is a form of compression, and also electric guitar amps, when you get past 5 and 6K, they roll off a lot of the top end. So let's get to balancing this stuff. And Danny, if you would, play again. Okay, so I've got a blend going, and as you can see, I switched it so that we have a peak reading in the computer, and I think the loudest peak was around -8. I've got my preamps opened up just to the point of where they were starting to clip a little bit, and I was getting up into the headroom of the electronics, and I backed them off just a little bit. I'm not trying to get all of the distortion through the amp. It's a little bit in stages. I want to make sure that I'm running the signal nice and hot through the preamps to get that full, you know, sturdy sound, the overtones of the analog path. But I'm not clipping, but I'm right up there in the area where there's a little bit of saturation happening. And I've got the microphones blended where, like I said before, I thought overall the 414 was the best, fullest sounding one, and then the Ampeg Jet was some of that mid-range and warmth. Those two microphones are balanced pretty equally, and then the brighter 57 that's on the projector amp combo is a little bit quieter. It's down maybe 5 dB from where the other two faders are, and you know, we have some EQ and brightness and low end. We have an EQ on the plasma pedal and the amount of distortion and the volume that it can be. I will play with it a little bit. I also have an EQ on the path that's from the console to the computer. So what that's going to allow me to do is I'm going to be able to EQ my blend from the desk on that one channel into the computer. I'm going to be able to EQ the blend that I have going. I don't really feel like I need to do much in the way of individual EQ yet, but I also need to hear this in the track. I'm going to ask Danny to play one more time, and I'm going to see what some adjustments now on the plasma pedal will give me to maybe brighten or darken this a little bit. What's a little bit more distortion, a little less distortion sound like, and what if I just push the amps a little bit harder with the volume here. So I will I'll experiment a little bit with that and kind of talk to you about what I'm doing. There will be a close-up of the setting that we end up using on the plasma pedal, just so you can kind of get a look at it. So I left the voltage control on this. You'll see the voltage control is how, like, it's sort of the amount of distortion. Then there's a low frequency and a high frequency EQ. And I moved everything a little bit to kind of see what an adjustment would be. And I left the voltage where it was, the low and high frequencies where they were. And there's also a blend knob, and I backed the blend off just a little bit, so they had a little bit more of the just straight signal and a little bit less of the plasma. The distortion, it's probably like an 80-20 blend, so it's mostly distorted signal in the blend. And then I turned the volume up a little bit. So the volume is the output stage of the pedal, and I turned it up so that it would push the amps a little bit harder with the sound that I have going. So now this is the first stage of getting the sound. We've got our gain structure. We've got a sound that in my mind in isolation is definitely towards what we want to do. But now we need to listen to it with the track. And once we do that, might make some further adjustments. But then I'm also going to want to try a couple different guitars just to see what they might offer. So let's get into that. I'm going to play the tune, and Danny will play along. Can we do it one more time, please? Just because I'm still adjusting the sounds and just sort of thinking about what it is I need to do. I think it sounds pretty good as a start. Is the click loud enough and the balance cool for you?
All sounds
awesome.
Great.
Okay. Okay, I think it's pretty good. I want to EQ the sound a little bit. So if you would play again in isolation, I'm just going to now adjust some of the overall EQ I have. If you would, sir. So as you can hear the difference, I'll take it in and out. One more time, Danny. So I added a little bit of top boost to it and some mid-range. I turned up just a little bit around just under 2 kilohertz, a little bit around 9,000 cycles. I cut a little bit around 450 and added just a little bit of bottom around 80. So just kind of extending. It's distortion pedal, guitar amps are very mid-rangey, and I'm just trying to get the sound, the frequencies that aren't as dominant to kind of come up and get a little bit more of an even sound. So let's record one more time. All right, so I pulled back some of that high frequency stuff I was adding in. Can we? So we're still kind of getting to our sound. pretty cool. So what I did, the little bit of adjustments that I made were that I turned that Ampeg Jet amp down just a little bit in the blend, and I turned that 57 that's on the projector amp down just a little bit, because I like what I'm doing with the overall EQ and just sort of the way it's extending the brightness a little bit, but it's making the brighter sounds, especially that 57 that's on the projector amp, feel a little bit too strong in the blend. So I backed it off a little bit and changed my blend in that way so that I could have the EQ that I want to use be a little bit more usable. And now I think the other thing I'd like to do just quickly is audition a couple of other guitars in the chorus. It seemed like you played that pretty well, sir.
Thank you.
So I'm going to just take my track out of record. Little Stratotone. My friend Dallas Green gave me that guitar. It's a cool little thing. We like it. It has a tiny body with a neck like a baseball bat. It's a great guitar. Let's hear this guitar. All right. Maybe not, but I'm just interested to hear it in the chorus. Because maybe it could be the second guitar. Maybe they don't need to be both the same guitar for the double tracks we have. Okay, so that potentially is a usable sound. These pickups are hotter. I've got a hotter recording level. It's a little bit, because now the amps are being pushed even more by the hotter pickups in this guitar. It's sounding a little soft. That might be cool. I don't want to start with the sound, but it's nice to know that we've got that available. And then we're gonna try one other guitar, if you would. This is where I also get to act like a roadie and hand off the guitars. Let's hear what you got. Cool. All right. Well, I mean, this is just changing the guitar we didn't change anything about the setup, but it makes a lot of difference. What's interesting I'm hearing about these pickups are a little bit hotter than the Tele as well. But do you notice how much longer the distortion, the plasma pedal is kind of hanging on? It's like with the Tele, because the signal's not as hot from the pickups. Every time he stops and changes a chord, the distortion goes away much quicker. This is kind of hanging on a little bit more. Sounds a little bit fatter, doesn't it? I'd be interested to now hear this one in the track and maybe compare it to the other two that we have. Ready? Okay, I think it's very cool, but now listening to it and in the context of things, feels like it's hanging on, like that aspect that I pointed out feels like it's hanging on a little too much and it's muddying things up. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that the Tele had a little bit more bite, a little bit more punch to it.
So maybe let's get the Tele down, that sound that we started with. Sir, may I have your guitar? And then then when we get to doubling this guitar, because there is a double, there's two parts, we'll just sort of experiment maybe with what the double guitar can be. Sometimes it's nice to have the same guitar as a double left and right, and it makes it feel very uniform and big. Other times it's nice to have two sounds that are doing the same thing, that are similar, but they are making the distortion and things react a little bit differently, and like the frequency response is just a little bit different. And then it provides actually like an image that's not as powerful and forceful in terms of unity, but it's actually can be more interesting in the stereo field. So we'll get to that and they'll check that out. Let's check our tuning, and then where would you like to start at the top, or you want to stay on the chorus?
Let's start at the top.
Okay.
And then...
Okay, maybe for the second pre-chorus we'll come in with those sort of diamond chords, but let's just hit this first chorus right at the top.
Okay.
Not
so
not
no pre-chorus.
no, not this first one. Let's not lead into it. Now, I just think the reason I'm asking him to do this, I just kind of out of this sort of more broken down atmospheric first verse that we're sort of trying to get to. I just want the first chorus to just like hit really heavy and hard. And we've already kind of set that vibe up a little bit by the intro, but I just kind of want to bring it back really strong, and then record sort of the diamond meaning like the power chord that lasts a whole measure in the second pre-chorus. And I know that because if my intention is to do that in the second pre-chorus, if it's desired later, I change my mind that I want them in the first pre-chorus, well, I've got them that I can just fly over there. But I'm trying to make decisions now to move forward and begin to shape things and arrange this. But also in the back of my mind, I know that if that becomes a decision that I want to revise, I have a way to revise it. If I was in question and I didn't have the second pre-chorus, I might say, okay, hey, I'm not sure about this. Let's record those parts, but I'll mute them until the chorus comes in. It's important to check in with how musicians are feeling and just kind of make sure you're keeping the vibe happy, that they're doing the hard work really. They're the ones that are really helping bring it to life. So, you ready, Chief?
Yes, sir.
Light it up and let it burn. Won't silence the truth in the night. Yeah, I won't bury it. Ooh, I won't bury it. Ooh, I won't bury it.
I feel like I want to double with one of these guitars. So let's pick one.
Sure. I think that the Stratotone sounded the most different from this one.
Okay, well, let's try it. And by the way, the reason that we doubled the guitars is that it's kind of typical in rock music. You like, especially like a heavier tone, the sort of denser rhythm track that you want to have with especially rock guitar sounds. It's nice to have a doubled performance so that it really fills out the stereo field and it can be really impactful and huge. It's harder with just one guitar to have it be as impactful, especially like if I only had one heavy guitar for this song, well, I'd pretty much have to put it in the middle if I wanted it to fill sort of both speakers. And it being in the middle, it's sort of sitting on top of the bass and the vocal. So I want to get it off to the side. I want that excitement off to the edge. And when the chorus comes and this heavier guitar comes in, and it's like, it's impactful, but not over the top of the vocal and the snare drum and the bass and all the things that are living in the middle. And then, in this particular case, we chose to have two different guitars doing the doubling as opposed to the same guitar, because the plasma pedal and the amps are reacting a little bit differently. I mean, Danny's playing the part the same way, but the way that the guitars are interacting with the rest of the chain The plasma pedal doesn't quite sustain the same. The frequencies don't respond the same. The amps are not the same. So it's not as similar and stable as an image. So that's a choice we could have made to where it was more similar and there wasn't as much discrepancy. But sometimes I like the slight difference that it gives because it makes the image swim around a little bit and makes it a little bit more interesting to listen to because the distortion and the way that the sound is coming on and cutting off with a very rhythmic part like this, it just kind of makes it a little bit more interesting in the stereo field. And that's, that's one of the reasons why it's nice to double things. It's like a thickening, doubling vocals, or is, one very common thing, or the way that the pre-production has, there's layers of different instruments doing the same part, because then you can play with the image, you can play with the depth of stuff. Earlier I showed where Graham has that very distorted leading guitar in the instrumental, and we put cleaner guitar and the slide guitar underneath, the slide acoustic underneath it, and it just kind of gives it some more dimension and space. I could maybe I could leave Graham's leading instrumental guitar in the middle, and I could possibly pan the slide guitar off to the right and the clean electric with reverb off to the left, and you get this really cool image and this big soundscape. So doubling these guitars is just giving us a bigger presentation and really spreading out the image. I was going back and forth between the first track we had on the Stratotone, which was really dark and thick, and then the Jupiter, the Silvertone, which is really cool the way it made the distortion behave, but it's just a little too fizzy, a little too bright, and it was making the track feel a little lightweight to me, and I just like the feeling of the heaviness that the Stratotone and the Tele were giving me. Now I'm probably gonna now that we've decided on the guitar, we know we're done with the Tele. I'm going to adjust the plasma a little bit, but I'm gonna do what Danny normally does, and I'm just gonna take a picture of the pedal, so in case I change any settings, we can get back to it.